They're coming to get you, Barbara.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
He's coming to get you, Barbara.
It's hard from today's perspective to imagine a time when there wasn't a zombie apocalypse. That really begins with the release of George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead.
It's such a ubiquitous film in my life. It feels like it's been there from birth. I probably saw it in certain parts and certain versions on television from a very, very young age, to the extent that I really thought it was always with me.
When I finally saw the film on cable, I was surprised by how unsettled and terrifying it was, and how subversive some parts of it were, even for a film that's from 1968.
I've seen it a ton of times, and I get something different out of it every time.
I was about 11 years old, and it played late night cable access, and it just blew me away. I loved it so much.
When I saw Night of the Living Dead the first time, I had that, oh, I get it moment, where just like Citizen Kane, I could see how revolutionary it was.
What Night of the Living Dead really did was modernize horror. It made horror about everyday people, something in a real life situation that could happen to you. And I think that's what made it so incredibly terrifying.
There could be 15 million of those things out there. That's how much good these windows are.
It's a movie that was produced for so little money in such unlikely circumstances, but it's also a movie that revolutionized the entire genre.
I had no idea that it was going to become what it has. I don't think anyone did. I can't even believe that I was chosen for that role. People were, like, asking for my autograph? Like, what?
We never anticipated it being anything more than a black and white drive-in movie. I've grown to learn how to appreciate and understand how it did change people's lives.
Romero was among the first people to imagine the zombies as creatures who came alive and were hungry for human flesh.
Even outside of zombies, it really became a trend, this idea of infection and contagion, and everyone is susceptible.
Night of the Living Dead is kind of the new Hollywood of the horror genre. It shows really fallible heroes. It shows the government being totally impotent and worthless in an apocalyptic situation. It really kind of changed the game and changed how people think about horror survivors.
You're crazy. Those things are going to be at every window and door in this place. We've got to get down into the cellar.
Go down in your damn cellar. Get out of here!
It doesn't resolve in a way that you might be used to watching more mainstream horror films or horror films up on the level of Night of the Living Dead. It plays rough and it plays smart.
I think there's a lot of Night of the Living Dead that is completely timeless, and not just about how it looks, or how it feels, or how the actors act. I just think that the actual threat will never, ever stop being scary.
Did Night of the Living Dead spark a new movement? It is the movement. You look before and after, and nothing was the same.
We didn't make a classic film. We made the best film we could. The fans made it a classic. I met him in a theater environment. I was sharing a dressing room with a fellow who became mutual friends of ours, Rudy Ritchie. Rudy invited George to see one of our shows, and George swooped into our dressing room wearing a black satin cape with a red satin lining, spouting lines from Cyrano de Bergerac. It's not ordinarily how you would meet someone, but I was prepped by Rudy to expect that George was a kind of a creative and free spirit, and he certainly was that. We became kind of friends and started hanging out, and the two of us decided, well, we need to do something to keep groceries on the table. Maybe we should try to make films as a living. So we formed a company called The Latent Image.
Romero came from very humble beginnings. He was an industrial filmmaker. In Pittsburgh, there was all these heads of industry that just wanted advertising, and that's where Romero worked. So he really cut his teeth on ads and kind of basic industrial films.
The fibers are covered with this stuff.
Oh, this box has never been opened.
And that's how we got started. Here's a camera, here are a couple of guys. It was not too far from you bring the costumes, I'll bring the props, somebody bring a camera, and let's set up our movie company.
It was a group of people who had diverse skills, people from a theatrical background, people from a radio background. It was really a gaggle of young people who were all interested in making movies, but who didn't really have any professional background. There wasn't that Hollywood safety net of pros and experts.
George had a very unique style of directing. I don't think I've ever worked with another director that was quite like it. He really liked to engage the actors. He really liked the actors to say their own words or say them in their own, certainly in their own tone. Lots of times didn't give direction. Would just say, that, you know, be one of those, that's great, give me one more. You know, no, mix it up. You know, make it a little more angry. And he was very patient about that, even though we didn't have a budget for it, you know.
The way that he shoots, like the way that he holds his camera, there's something that just doesn't feel artificial about it, like a lot of films do. Just a feeling of authenticity to his films that a lot of other directors just don't know how to achieve.
In addition to being a very clever writer and just a technically excellent filmmaker, he goes all the way. He shows you the guts, the spleen, the liver, everything. He turns bodies inside out with a massive smile on his face.
I think my favorite thing about George A. Romero as a director is just how much fun he really imbues into his entire filmography. There is always a sense when these films are scary or politically charged, which truly all of them are, that he's having a really great time and he's making sure all his performers and the crew are having a good time too. And I honestly think that's why you can watch every single film he's made and find some level of enjoyment. I think he's an infectious filmmaker where you really feel the way that he feels about his films.
That he's kind of primarily a satirist. As much as he worked so deeply in horror, he really loved putting humor in all of his work. All of his work looked at some part of society, some idea, and kind of lampooned it at the same time as it was making it horrific and weird.
My immediate thought, and when it comes to George A. Romero, is this guy's kind of a joker. This guy's kind of slick. This guy knows he can toy with an audience. And I think you could see that in Night of the Living Dead. I mean, there's all these touches where, I mean, this is a very cheaply made movie. They made it for almost nothing, and you know, there's a lot of things in terms of performances and stuff you can kind of laugh and giggle at. But at the same time, George A. Romero is laughing and giggling at you.
My fans would like me to just go back and remake a really bawdy, outrageous thing like my original Dawn of the Dead. And I keep coming up with different ideas and approaches and playing with things that I've always wanted to play with. And, you know, there's some elements of a Western in this film, and I'm just out there having fun, you know. And I hope that there's enough in it that the fans are gonna, you know, still have a good time with it. So.
He was someone that engaged with young, emerging filmmakers and film students in a way that I don't think any other director really did. So many people looked up to him because he would take the time to give them advice, to answer their questions that they would write into him. He was so personally engaged with his fan base that I think it's impossible not to recognize him as probably one of the kindest and most generous filmmakers that's ever existed.
When people say George was generous with his time, he certainly was, and there was nothing that was phony about that. I would see him at conventions, and if there was a line waiting to talk to him and get an autograph from him for 2.5 hours, he would not leave until every person had been talked to.
He would take the time to talk to every single fan and find out about them, and he always was interested in what you're doing, and he just has a dedicated legion of fans still, even after his death.
If I had to rank my 3 favorite George A. Romero films, it would be his Dead series, and it would be in the order that they came out, actually. Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead.
My top 3 in terms of George A. Romero's filmography, certainly Night of the Living Dead is on there. It's probably solidly at number 3, simply because of how pervasively monumental and genre-defining it is.
Growing up, Dawn of the Dead was always the most special film to me and is still one of my favorite films of all time.
I think my top 3 Romero movies probably starts with Day of the Dead. I'm a big fan of that one. I think he was really interested in feminism, and Day of the Dead explores that as well as also really showing how toxic masculinity is. You really see the failures of masculinity in that one.
You want to see something cool? Okay, here it goes. Check this out. This is a piece of the elevator where Stephen from Dawn of the Dead gets attacked by zombies. This is an actual chunk of the elevator from JCPenney, and you can see on the back of it, Savini stage blood. And this thing stays in my shirt pocket forever. Not forever, until I get home.
George Romero was a pretty complex person, very creative, and I think that creativity comes from, spurred by intellectual curiosity.
He understood art, you know, he understood light, he understood composition, amazingly so.
What makes me happy about the legacy of Night of the Living Dead is it has a legacy. And make no mistake about it, George was our ringleader. He was our guru and our center post. Everybody worked their butts off, everybody contributed, but George was kind of the guy at the center of everything. I felt an immense loss. Well, you can imagine, to have any relationship, any kind of a relationship that endures for 60 years, there's got to be some substance to it, and I dearly miss him. I can tell you truthfully, there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about him.
George A. Romero really kind of wrote the zombie Bible with Night of the Living Dead, probably without actually knowing that. You never hear the word zombie in Night of the Living Dead, you only hear ghoul. And of course, the original title of the film was Night of the Flesh Eaters, so that's another term that is kind of the antithesis to zombie.
Government spokesman warned that dead bodies will continue to be transformed into the flesh-eating ghouls.
Nobody knew what a zombie or a ghoul was when we were making Night of the Living Dead. So the direction generally was, well, you're dead and you're recently reanimated coming back to life. So how would you act? And people kind of made it up as they go.
You had zombies on screen up to that point, but zombies tended to be probably the most underutilized of classic mythic horror figures because all they really did for the most part was be summoned from the dead by someone who had this misguided Frankenstein, I am God kind of thing, bring the dead back to life to do their bidding.
Zombie! Allez, allez!
They're really based on this idea of Haitian voodoo zombies. Supernatural powers, someone controlling someone's mind. You saw this with Bela Lugosi in White Zombie from the 1930s and Jacques Tourneur's I Walked with a Zombie, and it was more about like kind of sleepwalking.
The voodoo priest could cure Mrs. Holland. Better doctors.
Now, the original Haitian zombie is kind of a tragic figure. It's a person who is believed that their soul has been captured by a witch doctor. And so they're a reanimated corpse insofar as they don't have free will. They don't have the ability to exert their free will.
Zombies? Yes, they are my servants.
In 1962, a film called Carnival of Souls came out, directed by Herc Harvey. In Carnival of Souls, you have ghosts that look remarkably similar to the zombies in Romero's Night of the Living Dead. So dark under-eye circles, pale skin. They're material in some way, and they're moving in the slow, kind of awkward, clumsy way that zombies do. So even though they don't talk about the characters in the same way or call them zombies, they're actually supposed to be some type of spirits. There's a clear through line between that film and what Romero would do with Night of the Living Dead.
So what really George Romero brought to the horror genre and the zombie genre specifically is this idea of a pervasive disease. It's not one person who's affected. It's potentially the entire world. It's infectious. It's all about racing the clock to make sure that you are not going to become a zombie.
At the very beginning, you're seeing the rules of the zombie. For one, there's a zombie out in the day. And I actually thought that was pretty cool when I was a kid too. I was like, oh, like, these monsters can walk in the day? That's awesome, right?
What he really established was the iconography of a zombie being slow-moving, really a reanimated corpse that can't run fast, doesn't have any cognition. They're just hungry, voraciously hungry, and they'll eat anything.
Medical examination of victims' bodies shows conclusively that the killers are eating the flesh of the people they kill.
He also really established how you can kill a zombie, which of course is a blow to the head. And this is the first time we've really seen this in any film.
That's one that really stuck with the genre throughout all of its different permutations over the years. You gotta get him in the head.
If you had a gun, shoot him in the head. That's a sure way to kill him. If you don't, get yourself a club or a torch. Beat him or burn him. They go up pretty easy.
To kill one, you have to destroy its brain or light it on fire. They seem to be afraid of fire. In Night of the Living Dead, zombies also ate bugs. We don't really talk about Romero's zombies eating animals, but they do.
Fans are always asking me, you know, I mean, when I go to one of these horror conventions, all they want to know is about really the rules. For example, would a zombie ever eat something other than a human?
I think the zombie's slowed gait is probably just a practical consideration, that the motor skills aren't great, you know, the ankle tendons aren't doing so well. What's interesting is that such a slow, shambling monster can still be so terrifying because it's the numbers, right?
Horde, like just masses of zombies. So even though they're moving slowly, they just overtake you because of their sheer numbers.
I wonder what it's like to watch this film without knowing any of the rules. Like, what's scary? You're like, oh, it's just a guy? And then he starts attacking her, attacking him. And then what was it like for the first time to see 3 men walking from the night? What was it like seeing 10 people? What was it like the first time you see them eating the flesh? I wonder. Could have been very, very, very fun to watch in 1968.
Nowadays, thanks to films like 28 Days Later and the Dawn of the Dead remake, zombies are running like Olympic sprinters, and they can dive over fences and scale walls and other things that really make them not creepy. I mean, you lost the creepy factor that Night of the Living Dead is so rich in.
The speeding up of zombies is a really contentious issue among horror fans. There's a lot of horror fans who love zombies, but no fast zombies. I like, they've gotta have them slow. However, I feel like the shift to faster zombies, it kind of signifies a shift of zombie subgenre into more of an action subgenre.
Even crazy, horror-y, find it in the bargain bin movies, they're all the George Romero zombie. Even the fast zombies, the way they spread an infection, they're still trying to bite you, you know? They're not sneezing on you.
You know, as far as I'm concerned, you know, go to the modern day zombie period is just a bastardization of what George created. It has nothing to do anymore with the simplicity of George's ghouls.
Are they slow moving, Chief? Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
Night of the Living Dead just created a new kind of urban folklore. When you ask a kid what a zombie is, it's a George Romero zombie.
George's zombies were very creepy, and that was important to him. He said so in, I think, Diary of the Dead, where these filmmakers are making a movie and there's a mummy in the movie, and one of the characters says to the other, "Mummies can't run because they're dead." It was a very pointed way of saying zombies don't run because they're dead.
I think for me, the best zombie in Night of the Living Dead, and keep in mind there's so many to choose from, is the naked woman.
If you take a look at this premise of recently dead people coming back to life, somebody would be naked.
And not only is this shocking to kind of see this naked body meander in front of the camera, it also kind of is very clear at this point in the film when you see her that it's not just that zombies are coming up from the graves. It's anyone who's dead in any sort of situation and in any environment is going to come back to life.
And we had the good fortune that one of the people who worked with us, Judy Ridley, had been taking art classes, and she knew a live figure model who had no trouble at all taking her clothes off in front of people. So we hired her, Carol Wayne, and she was our nude ghoul walking around with a morgue tag on her wrist.
Also adds a real element of sort of, I don't want to say sexiness, but a real element of mature content. So we talk a lot about how kids saw this film in matinees, and certainly the gore and the implications are terrifying, but they were also seeing a naked woman at a really young age, which you can't say of most films in the 1960s.
Is she all right?
I don't know what it is. She feels warm. Maybe it's shock.
Karen Cooper is the daughter of the Coopers, and we learned that she has sustained a bite.
One of those things grabbed her.
Bit her on the arm.
What's wrong?
Who knows what kind of disease those things carry? Is she conscious?
Barely.
It's a basement, it's a cellar, there's a girl, you know what she's gonna turn out to be, and you're just scared for that.
I mean, it's obviously something that we know is coming. We see that child being sickly through the whole movie. Someone who's watching a zombie movie in the 2000s knows that if anyone's moaning or showing a little weakness, they're gonna be a zombie soon enough, and all these people who are trying to heal her, they better, get out of the way.
I guess the way I viewed my character was as sort of a new monster. She wasn't a vampire or a werewolf or anything like that. She was kind of a new breed.
Oh, baby.
I wish I was there in the 60s, just having seen that in the first time. I probably would have been scarred for life, more so than I am now.
It was so wrong. It was just like so absolutely wrong. And it was in that moment I thought, oh yeah, okay, this movie is not gonna go places I think it should, and it has crossed that line where anything can happen.
I can't imagine at the time what the children watching this in the first couple of screenings must have thought of that. But this whole idea of the young eating the older generation was really subversive to me.
This is a very different death than any of the others in the film. There's biting, there's dismemberment, there's all of these things. This death feels very personal, unlike the others. This is a daughter killing her mother in a very slow, methodical way with a weapon. And you never actually see that in Night of the Living Dead, except for this instance where a zombie is weaponized.
Devastating but grotesque and amazing, and I love the gore, and you actually see the stabbing. I think it's like so visceral and scary.
It's unimaginable for me to think that this little girl would have ever had any knowledge that she would become the face of horror. And it's such simple makeup, again, done because they didn't have a huge budget. She just has her eyes blackened and her face super white and her hair kind of half in her face.
My dad and Marilyn Eastman did the makeup. So my dad made me up, with the pale face and those dark circles and, a bloody bandage. It was like, this is it? Why don't I get wounds? I was disappointed at the time, but now looking back, I'm glad that that's all I got, because it has turned out to be sort of iconic. So I'm happy now.
It's utterly terrifying and uncanny, I think because it's a child and we're supposed to keep children pure and symbols of hope. And here, this little girl who is going to stab her mother to death with a trowel is sort of standing in for how everything is upside down and kind of gone wrong in Night of the Living Dead.
Dwayne Jones, what a hell of a job he did. I must tell you that I think that Dwayne Jones was one of the best kinds of happenstances in that production.
Look, I know you're afraid. I'm afraid too. But we have to try to board the house up together.
Dwayne Jones is a very interesting factor in Night of the Living Dead because everyone creating the movie admits that he simply got the lead role because he was the best actor available. He was an actor in town in Pittsburgh, and he just was among the only professionals they knew.
Our friend Rudy Ritchie was originally supposed to play the character of Ben, and that was okay with everyone. Dwayne came to visit his family for Easter holiday in 1967. That Easter weekend, we auditioned him and decided on the spot, including Rudy, who had a vote in where we went with that Ben character. It was unanimous that we wanted Dwayne to be our Ben.
I was alone with 50 or 60 of those things, just standing there, staring at me. I started to drive. I just plowed right through them. They didn't move, they didn't run or just stood there staring at me.
I think this is one of the key performances of the 1960s. Unlike the other actors that are in the film, and keep in mind a lot of them are not actors, they're friends and colleagues of the directors, Dwayne Jones was a very well-trained actor, and you really see this come through in the film. He commands that performance.
We luck into a safe place, and you're telling us we gotta risk our lives just because somebody might need help, huh?
Yeah, something like that.
You really trust him and are immediately on his side. I think even a pretty, on the fence 1968 racist person would be like, I trust that guy the most.
Is there anything I can do?
I don't want to hear any more from you, mister. If you stay up here, you take orders from me. And that includes leaving the girl alone.
He had that kind of gravitas that sort of meant that he was going to be the voice of reason under crazy circumstances. And ultimately, the fact that he was black didn't matter. But the fact that he was black, of course, did matter. It really did matter, especially in 1968.
So you have a white woman, terrified, catatonic, holed up in an abandoned farmhouse with a black man. That right away set up in the minds of the audience some pretty extreme parameters, again, for 1967.
Don't you know what's going on out there? This is no Sunday school picnic.
Don't you understand? My brother is alone.
Your brother is dead.
No! My brother is not dead!
So the year before Night of the Living Dead was released, a film called In the Heat of the Night came out with Sidney Poitier. And in that film, 1967, there was kind of the slap hurled around the world when Sidney Poitier slaps a white landowner after the landowner slaps him. But just 1 year after that, when Night of the Living Dead comes out, you have this similarly capable character of Ben. And he's not just slapping a white character, he is giving that character a full-on beating at one point in the film. And it is not nearly as controversial because it's not a studio project, but also I think it said something about the ability of horror to really push boundaries.
George Romero just wanted to shake things up, and he wanted to have a black hero in a film, and that was the entire point, that he wanted to do things that weren't really being done before because he was very progressively minded.
And I got a kid down there. She can't possibly, I couldn't bring her up here. She can't possibly take all the racket and those things smashing through the windows.
Well, you're her father. If you're stupid enough to go die in that trap, that's your business. However, I am not stupid enough to follow you.
My memories of Dwayne were, I feel like I loved him. And there was one scene, of course, where he had to throw me, sort of down onto the sofa, and his concern was that he was gonna hurt me. On the day of the premiere in '68, I got a dozen roses at my house. I guess there was a card, but my mother had taken the delivery. And I asked her, are they from Dwayne? And She looked at me, and I think she finally, like, oh, I see what's happening. And she said, I think they might be. She let me believe that they were from Duane because she knew that it was important to me to believe that they were from Duane. So, you know, kind of makes me want to cry thinking about that, but so that's how I felt about Duane.
I think without Duane Jones in that role, Night of the Living Dead would have been a very, very different film. We talk a lot about why it's iconic and why it's so beloved. And honestly, you can talk about how gory it is and how groundbreaking it was in terms of zombies. To me, it's Duane Jones and that performance as Ben. He brought something to it that was absolutely mesmerizing and empathetic.
He was such a special man and died far, far too young. And I think all of us kind of feel cheated that he's not around anymore.
I consider Night of the Living Dead, us and the production, and Duane to be very, very fortunate that the convergence of those factors all came together with him being our Ben.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're coming back on the air after an interruption due to technical problems.
There's a lot of politics in 1968 that you can read into Night of the Living Dead. I think it's always important to underline that the filmmakers didn't necessarily intend a lot of what connects there, but it just works that way. There was the Vietnam War, there was the Civil Rights Movement. I think especially what you were seeing on the television and hearing on the radio really hit people in the gut. It was something terrifying because it seemed so realistic.
In the film, you have media reports that are mirroring the kind of media that people were getting at home. I think that's why it was so recognizable for the audience and why it really, truly was terrifying.
The same year Martin Luther King Jr. is assassinated, same year Bobby Kennedy is assassinated. What is this movie telling me? That we're not prepared for the world, that we're not prepared for the violence and the catastrophes that are gonna come our way.
And then Johnny came and he ran and he fought this man. And I got so afraid. I ran. And Johnny didn't come.
What you get the sense of is subliminal panic. There was danger in the land, that it was viral, and that what might happen with your kids if they're not killed in Vietnam, what state would they be in when they got back? What's going on with young people today? Which is also, the generational thing was also terrifying, which was something that Romero, of course, tapped into brilliantly when he made Night of the Living Dead.
Two other people upstairs, a man and a girl.
We heard the screaming.
Yeah, but I didn't know who they were, and I wasn't about to take any unnecessary chances.
Of course not, Harry.
At the time, the nuclear family was dissolving, and you can see this from the beginning of the film. It's a brother and sister, and then later on, it's the Coopers. And then at the end, when Barbara is like pulled into the zombies by Johnny, it's like you can't trust your family anymore. Everything we've known before is just thrown away. Like the youth of the 1960s weren't having it.
Also, having a black character as a strong lead is a real step forward in 1968. You could really see a civil rights story there, whether they intended it or not.
When finally he becomes the only survivor, he, without giving it away, winds up in a way, one of the most famous endings, I think, in horror movie history is literally on a junk heap, and he's been shot.
All right, Vince, hit him in the head, right between the eyes.
And there is a strong element of sort of white supremacist, redneck retribution at work at the end of that film. So in other words, what Romero really effectively does is he sets up a movie and he says, this is what normality looks like. This is how normality is disrupted. This is how normality, to a certain extent, is regained, and this is how it's completely destroyed again. And this time it's destroyed not at the hands of the zombies, but by us.
Okay, he's dead. Let's go get him. That's another one for the fire.
As right around that time in the comic strip Pogo, the lead character was widely quoted around the world for saying, "We have met the enemy, and he is us."